Good evening, I'm Nima Rajan, and this is Forum Daily for Tuesday, June 7th. Tonight, the World Bank's outlook for the economy has sharply downgraded. It's pointing to Russia's war against Ukraine, the prospect of widespread food shortages, and concerns about the potential return of stagflation, which is a toxic mix of high inflation and sluggish growth unseen for more than 4 decades. The 189-country anti-poverty agency predicts the world economy will expand by 2.9% this year. This is down from the 4.1% it forecast in January and well below growth of 5.7% last year. The agency doesn't foresee a much brighter picture in 2023 and 2024. It's predicting just 3% global growth for both years. Turning to the Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles, where pandemic recovery, climate change, and immigration are expected to be on the agenda. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Defense Minister Anita Anand, Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault, and Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly will represent Canada at the meeting, which will exclude Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. Mr. Trudeau didn't criticize the U.S. for not inviting the countries, but other leaders are. Mexico's president won't be attending in protest. Statistics Canada says the merchandise trade surplus fell from $2.3 billion in March to $1.5 billion in April. Both imports and exports hit record highs, helped by rising prices. Imports rose 1.9% to $62.8 billion, and exports rose 0.6% to $64.3 billion. Exports of consumer goods rose 5%, boosted by prepared and packaged seafood products. Peel Regional Police say there is no current concern for public safety. This comes after a 17-year-old from Ontario was charged with allegedly making online threats toward an LGBTQ event in Florida. The Miami Police Department says it received a report on Sunday of someone on the video chat platform Omegle threatening to commit a mass shooting at the Pride on the Block 2022 event in West Palm Beach. The West Palm Beach Police Department said the teenager was arrested in Canada in the early hours on Monday. On the West Coast, the BC Coroner Service is recommending the province implement a coordinated heat alert system to prevent deaths in hot weather emergencies. On Monday, the province announced a 2-stage heat response system to help people stay safe. This comes as the threat of heat-related emergencies increase. More than 600 people died last summer when a heat dome settled over the province. It sent temperatures soaring into the 40s for days, and most of the victims were in poorer neighborhoods. All right, well, meanwhile, the number of confirmed monkeypox cases in Canada continues to climb. Officials in BC are investigating the province's first known case of monkeypox, which brings the total number in the country to nearly 80, the most being in Quebec with 71. More than 700 cases have been detected around the globe in countries where the illness is not typically found, mostly in Europe. Moving to Quebec City, where maternal mortality is the focus of a conference today. The Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada will be discussing a toolkit to help determine the underlying causes of maternal mortality and let provinces share their data. The Society says Canada lags behind other countries in data collection and needs to get a national picture of shifting patterns in maternal health. Toronto police have released a sketch of a young girl whose remains were found in a dumpster in a high-end neighborhood last month. Police say the girl's remains were likely placed there days before May 2nd, but she may have died last summer. The girl is between 4 and 7 years old. Police are looking for a 2011 to 2014 dark-colored Porsche Cayenne SUV. It was captured on video in the area. The backers of a proposed $1.5 billion passenger train that would connect Calgary to Banff are pressing pause on their plans. They say they are waiting for a yes or no from the Alberta government before proceeding with the project's next steps. Laricon Capital Incorporated says it has not yet received a response to its proposal that the province commit $30 million annually to the project. Laricon managing partner Jan Waterroos says the money, over an approximately 50-year span, would help cover the project's mortgage. This would make the province the ultimate owner of the train. The press secretary to Alberta's transportation minister said in an email that the proposal is still being examined. A PEI First Nations group is delivering 3 tiny homes for the Mi'kmaq Native Friendship Center in Halifax. Lennox Island First Nation carpenters built the structures. The small homes are part of the Friendship Center's efforts to address the ongoing housing shortages for Indigenous residents in the city. Stay tuned. More news from around the world coming up next. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau isn't saying whether he supports President Joe Biden's decision to exclude Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba from this week's Summit of the Americas. Mr. Trudeau acknowledges that some of the countries in the Western Hemisphere are less like-minded than others, but he says they all share a number of urgent issues, such as migration pressures, climate change, and fully recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. All 3 are expected to be on the agenda at the week-long event. Well, with us now to unpack the summit is Dr. Laura Macdonald, political science professor at Carleton University and an expert in Canada-Latin America relations. She joins us now. Ma'am, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thanks, Nima. Great to be here.
Now, what reasons did the U.S. president give to exclude Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua from the summit?
Well, he said that all 3 countries are autocracies. One of his spokespeople said that they're dictatorships, and the U.S. doesn't like dictatorships, and therefore they're just not invited.
And Mexico's president is skipping this summit because he says all countries in the Western Hemisphere were not invited. So how would this boycott impact the relevance of this event?
Well, I think it's really unfortunate because there were some really important issues that, in fact, Biden had put on the agenda, like migration, like the recovery from COVID. But this controversy is just going to undermine the success of the event and the credibility of the U.S. participation in the eyes of Latin American and Caribbean participants, I think, who just generally don't support the idea of boycotts. In fact, Cuba had been boycotted from the summit since it was first created in 1994 up to 2015, when Obama finally invited Cuba to participate. And he did so because Latin American and Caribbean countries just didn't accept the idea that it was a good idea to leave out a country like Cuba. They didn't think it was a wise idea because it would intervene in the domestic affairs of another country, but also that it was just ineffective, that leaving out Cuba had never worked to promote democracy in that country. And I would assume the same is true for the other 2 countries that are now on the list, Venezuela and Nicaragua.
And we know the United States is trying to repair relations with Latin America that were damaged under the Trump administration. So how would these recent moves impact such efforts?
Exactly. So it's really frustrating in that respect because we did expect that Biden would have a warmer, more open relationship with the countries of the region, and that that he would adopt more open policies towards Cuba than Trump had done. But this just seems to fall back on old patterns where the U.S. thinks that they can decide what happens in the region and who's invited to events and who isn't. And frankly, what many Latin Americans see as unwanted political interference by the United States as the hegemon in the region. They've been trying hard to develop a more independent system for the region, and this seems to just fly in the face of all those hard-won efforts by Latin American countries.
And one of the key issues in Latin America right now, and a key topic at this summit, will be migration. We know thousands of migrants are heading toward the U.S. from southern Mexico right now. So what is driving this migration in Latin America?
Yes, this was one of the really important issues that was going to be discussed, partly because for Biden as U.S. leader, it is always an important topic to try to deal with the pressures on the U.S. southern border. Why is this happening? Why are millions of people leaving their homes and moving elsewhere in the region, many to the U.S.? Basically, it's because many of these countries have become unsustainable in the light of, weak democratic institutions and widespread crime and violence and corruption and complicity of governments in the types of activities engaged in by drug cartels, and the impact of the COVID pandemic has not helped because Latin America was one of the hardest hit regions by the pandemic and is still recovering in terms of health and the economy. There just aren't jobs for all these people. And also the impact of climate change has been quite severe in many countries of the region.
A lot of important conversations to keep our eyes on. Dr. Macdonald, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
Thank you. It's been great to be with you.
Coming up after the break, we'll be taking a closer look at the recent threats of Tesla CEO Elon Musk to walk away from his $44 billion bid to buy Twitter. An expert says he might want out of the deal. We'll have more on this after the break. Elon Musk is threatening to walk away from his $44 billion bid to buy Twitter, a move which one law professor says shows the Tesla CEO is looking for a way out of the deal. But Professor Brian Quinn from Boston College doesn't think the maneuver will hold up in court, since Mr. Musk already waived his ability to ask for more due diligence. Mr. Musk is accusing the company of refusing to give him information about its spam bot accounts. Twitter shares fell more than 4% on Monday morning, which likely incensed the shareholders who filed suit against Mr. Musk late last month for deflating the price of the stock. Well, joining us now to talk more about this is Professor Brian Quinn, Associate Professor at Boston College Law School and an expert in mergers, acquisitions, and deals. Professor, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you for having me.
So can you unpack what we know so far about this dispute between Twitter and Mr. Musk?
Well, this is a classic case of buyer's remorse. In April, when he made this offer to buy the company, it was a good deal for him and a good deal for them. But given the way the market has turned south in the last 2 months, it's pretty clear to Mr. Musk at this point that he's paying too much money for this company. So now he's looking for a way out.
So you're saying he definitely wants to look for a way out of this deal. So are these spam bot accounts the only reason behind his threats to walk away?
Not really. I mean, the spam bot accounts are more of a pretext than they are an actual reason. He's overpaying for the company, so more likely than not, he's looking for an opportunity or something to point to so that he can walk away from the transaction without having to complete it. And the spam bots are a convenient excuse, but not going to be enough.
And we mentioned Twitter shareholders filed a suit against Mr. Musk over this chaotic deal. What were the claims in this suit?
So the lawsuit by the shareholders of Twitter against Musk deal with the fact that prior to his announcing that he was a 9% stockholder in the company, he was accumulating a large block of stock and didn't disclose it to the market in a manner that comports with the requirements of the law. So these shareholders are arguing that, hey, had they known that Elon Musk wanted to buy the company, maybe they wouldn't have sold their stock, or maybe they would have bought more stock, and that he violated his duty by not telling the stockholders and thereby manipulated the market. That lawsuit is adjacent to this. It's not really tied closely to the merger agreement itself, but it's a collective stockholders have.
So it seems like Mr. Musk is facing a lot of friction in this deal. How has this potential merger impacted his credibility and his multiple businesses?
Well, it's hard to know what it means with the rest of his businesses. But in this particular transaction with respect to Twitter, he signed the merger agreement. He waived his opportunity for diligence. It's like he made an offer to purchase a house without doing a home inspection. And he signed the merger agreement after having made the offer. So he has a legal obligation to do this deal. And the fact that now he's looking to walk away or at the very least renegotiate the price does hurt his credibility with respect to the Twitter board. It's hard to imagine that they're going to take him very seriously with respect to a renegotiation going forward.
So how do you see this deal playing out, sir?
So at this point, this transaction is a lot like other transactions that we've seen that go sideways after they've been announced. The next thing that's likely going to happen is the Twitter board will continue to do what's required to make this deal close. And at some point, it'll become obvious to them that Musk is foot dragging and perhaps doesn't really want to do the deal. And they'll likely then file a lawsuit in the state of Delaware seeking specific performance, asking the court to order Musk to complete the transaction. So we're going to likely end up in court. And at that point, they either litigate and Twitter is able to get Musk to close the transaction, or they renegotiate the price and short circuit the litigation.
So what are you keeping your eyes on as this negotiation continues to unfold?
So the next thing to keep one's eyes on in this is going to be whether or not, or when the Twitter board decides to file a lawsuit in Delaware. And that lawsuit will just be the next step in terms of this renegotiation or this negotiation on getting this deal done. Litigation in Delaware might take as much as a year, and one can expect that between the filing of litigation and then ultimately the litigation being resolved, that the board and Musk might come to a renegotiated price in the deal rather than let the litigation proceed to the end.
Lots to keep our eyes on. All right, Professor Brian Quinn from Boston College Law School, thank you again for joining us today on Forum Daily.
You're very welcome.
Stay with us. Up next, we've got more news from around the world, of course. Russia takes credit for a strike that took out Western weapons supplied to Ukraine. Thousands of migrants continue to trek towards the U.S. border. 2 UN food agencies are warning of multiple food crises. And Australia's central bank once again raises its benchmark interest rate. We'll have these stories and more news from around the world coming up shortly after the break. So stay tuned. We'll be back on Forum Daily News. Russia claims its forces took out 2 American artillery systems and a howitzer supplied by Norway in its latest series of strikes on Ukrainian targets. Russia's defense ministry says its artillery barrage destroyed other Ukrainian equipment in the country's east, while its air force hit Ukrainian troops and artillery positions. The claims could not be independently confirmed. With the Summit of the Americas set to get underway this week, participating officials are expected to discuss the subject of mass migration. And it's a timely topic for some anxious Americans, as several thousand migrants have set out walking in the rain in southern Mexico. They are bound for the southern border of the United States. The group of an estimated 4,000 to 5,000 migrants represents the largest to attempt to leave southern Mexico this year and is meant to coincide with the summit. Turning to the UK now, where British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is vowing to, quote, get on with the job. This comes after surviving a no-confidence vote within his Conservative Party. Tory lawmakers voted 211 to 148 to support him as leader. Mr. Johnson is now scrambling to regain his authority. This comes as more Conservative lawmakers worry that he could be a liability with voters. Turkey has called on Greece to withdraw its armed forces from Aegean Islands. It's warning that the country will challenge the status of the islands if it fails to demilitarize them. On Tuesday, Turkey's foreign minister accused Greece of building a military presence on the islands in violation of treaties from 1923 and 1947. He said the islands were ceded to Greece on condition that they be kept demilitarized. The minister's comments come amid a new escalation in tensions between the NATO allies. Greece argues that Turkey has deliberately misinterpreted the treaties regarding armed forces on its eastern islands, and it says it has legal grounds to defend itself following hostile actions by Ankara. Cambodian and Chinese officials will break ground this week on the expansion of a port facility. The U.S. and others worry that it will be used by Beijing as a naval outpost on the Gulf of Thailand, but the government has denied that any Chinese military presence will be allowed. A government spokesperson describes the expansion of the Ream Naval Base as cooperation between China and Cambodia. Australia's central bank has lifted its benchmark interest rate for a second time in 5 weeks, changing the cash rate to 0.85% from 0.35%. The Reserve Bank of Australia lifted the rate by a quarter percentage point at its last monthly board meeting on May 3rd. It was the first rate hike in more than 11 years. Treasurer Jim Chalmers on Tuesday forecasted more rate increases, saying inflation in Australia would likely worsen. Meanwhile, the Bank of Jamaica is preparing to issue a nationwide digital currency for the first time following recent approval from legislators. The government says the move is expected to help many on the island of nearly 3 million who don't have bank accounts. The move comes almost 2 years after the Bahamas became the first country to roll out its digital currency nationwide. and more than a year after the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank created its own form of blockchain-based currency. That is available to 4 island nations, including St. Lucia, Grenada, Antigua and Barbuda, and St. Kitts and Nevis. 2 UN food agencies are warning of multiple looming food crises on the planet. A joint report by the World Food Programme and the Food and Agricultural Organization cites climate shocks, which includes droughts and flooding, the repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the war in Ukraine as to why food and fuel prices are rising so rapidly. WFP Executive Director David Beasley says besides hurting the poorest of the poor, the global food crisis threatens to overwhelm millions of families who are just getting by. The report says 6 nations face catastrophic conditions, including Ethiopia, Nigeria, South Sudan, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Somalia. Bars and restaurants in Spain will be obliged to offer doggy bags free of charge to clients to take home the food they have not eaten. This is under a new law aimed at reducing food waste. Under the new bill passed by the Spanish government on Tuesday, businesses in the food industry will have to draw up plans to try to reduce the amount of food wasted or else face possible fines. Stores and supermarkets will be asked to reduce the price on products as their date limit for recommended consumption approaches, and to also reach agreements with neighborhood organizations and food banks for the donation of such products to help the needy. All right, that'll do it for your look at national and international news. Take care, Canada. We'll see you next time on Forum Daily.